Hello everyone, this video is going to dive deeper into the reliability aspects in qualitative studies. So what we're trying to do is all have the same experience and find agreement. I'm pretty sure if we all sat down and tried to describe this picture, we might get some agreement, but not everyone is going to be seeing the same thing. And that's called Interrater Reliability. And what we're trying to do is quantify the amount of agreement between people when they are either coding interviews or focus group data or rating observations. And this is important because if we don't have reliability, we don't have a valid study. So in this example right here, everybody's being really consistent in our rating, but we're a little off target. Over here, we're on target, but nobody's really agreeing and we're not consistent in how we're interpreting the target. And over here at the very end, we finally have reliability and validity. So we're being consistent and we're on target. So we have to have this in qualitative studies as well as quantitative studies. And with reliability, we're really talking consistency again. We can do this in a lot of different ways. And I think it starts with member checking. And with member checking, this is at the end. This is not just a transcript that says, is this what I said? Do I agree or not agree with my transcript? This is member checking with your codes and themes. And what we're asking here is, are my interpretations true? Does this make sense to you? So when I did my skateboarding study, I explained the skate more theme to all of these middle school skateboarders. And it was so true for them that the words skate more, which was what I called it, they tagged it on everything. It was all over their skateboards. It was all over their locker, their binders, their tennis shoes. It was so true to them that they took ownership of it. Expert reviews are another way to do this. This could be checking in with a committee or a community of practice and saying, hey, here's what I'm finding. Is this consistent with what you have experienced? Is this consistent with the literature that you know of? Not to mention the literature that you've been reading as well. This can also be an expert review of your coding scheme and experts. So you could pull an entire code and all of the experts out of Deduce and have one of your committee members or an expert review just the excerpts to say, yes, I agree that these would fit into this code's definition. We can also do qualitative IRR, which I also call reflexive IRR. This is not calculations, this is just our discussions and agreements. This is really important with coding teams. So I was working on a project where we were trying to establish the knowledge level of standardized exams. So we would take an exam question and we would all write down what level of knowledge do you think this is? And there was probably 8 of us in a room and they would all share what we wrote down and we could not for the life of us get agreement. We started with Bloom's taxonomy, trying to say it would be this level. None of us agreed. We tried about 3 or 4 different frameworks and it didn't work. We broke into smaller coding teams to see if that worked. And Sarah is a content expert in science versus the dean who was helping on our coding team, who was a content expert in knowledge. Quite literally, she was a psychologist who studied how we learn. And for the life of them, they could not agree on anything. And it came down to the content and the background that was needed for these questions to understand what the actual knowledge level was. We can then take it even further and do quantitative interrater reliability. So we can look at percent agreement calculations. We can look at correlations between raters. And what we're doing there is we're looking for hard raters versus easy raters. So we can take 3 of us, so Sarah, Courtney, and Matt, and we can calculate the percent agreement between the 3 of us. So how many times did we actually agree? And we can get 70% or higher, and that's usually pretty good. But what we can also do is take that further and see when we disagree, how are we rating? And in this case, Sarah always rated easier, and Matt always rated higher, and I was always in the middle. And a lot of times content really does showing through here, and that there needs to be some sort of an expertise happening in your ratings. So when we were rating science teacher classrooms, we were looking at observational data. There were 2 science teachers who consistently rated the science teachers higher than 6 other teachers watching the same interview, same protocol, same training, but the science teachers were inferring what the teachers were doing, whereas the 6 other teachers who weren't science content experts didn't see it. Sometimes that's good, the expertise is needed. Sometimes that's not ideal, and that we want everyone to be able to see the same thing. So let's look a little bit deeper at this. When we're talking about an expert or a peer review, this is somebody else outside of your coding team taking a look at what you're doing and seeing if it holds for them, if they feel it's true, if you are going off into left space, if you're interpreting too much from the data. The easiest way to do this in Deduce is to pull one code and then copy all of the experts in that code into a Word doc, sending that person the Word document, and you can actually have them go through all of the excerpts and say, yes, no, this makes sense, this seems like it doesn't fit here, according to how you are defining the code itself. Reflexive IRR is what we did on our coding teams. And this is why we documented it. It is very, very important. So we're establishing one person usually as the standard. Typically, if this is your dissertation or your project and you are getting other people to code with you, you are the standard. You are the expert. And you're saying, what codes did you come up with? Are they the same thing? Do we need to collapse anything? And we go through one document code by code and say, did we agree on this? Do we not agree on this? What adjustments do we need to make? Are we adjusting the same amount of coding? Are we coding all sentences, whole paragraphs, just words? All those little things are needed to set this up. Then we take it a little bit further and we do hit-miss IRR. This is also called percent agreement. Once we have established the rough idea of codes and meanings, this lets us take it further and look at the reliability of the coding team itself. So we're going to go excerpt by excerpt, and we're going to tally if we hit, meaning everybody agreed or a majority agreed on that excerpt, or if we missed, meaning it was only coded by one person or not a majority. And basically what we're doing is we're looking at the proportion of total hits versus total codes. So we would add up how many total possible excerpts there were to agree on, and we will look at that and turn it into a percentage and get percent agreements. Deduce will help us with this, but it's really just helping us organize the data, and then we can quickly go through and tally the hits and misses quicker. And the final step to IRR is an interclass correlation. This is really the most ideal method when you are dealing with multiple raters who are judging a scenario or observation. If we're just looking at a coding team, ICC is not typically done. Usually we're just looking at percent agreement. If we have multiple raters judging something, that's when we want to look deeper. Because we can have consistency within a rater, but not across rater. So Sarah and Matt were both consistent in their ratings, but Sarah was always harder in her ratings or always easier in her ratings. We can adjust for that later. So what ICC does is we're looking at the amount of variance in the scores that are given, and we're trying to see, is that variance because of the true score? So the teacher's observation rating, that would be their true score. Or is the variance due to measurement error because the coders are all rating slightly differently? So ICC is kind of controlling for rater effects. And we can actually even them out on the backside. If I know that Sarah is always harder, then whatever her final rating is, I can have some sort of a value that pulls that rating down. And if Matt is always easier, then I can have some sort of a value that whatever his final rating is, I can add 0.5 to it. And that would even them out. So for example, if we had an ICC rating of 0.8, that would indicate that 80% of the observed variance is due to the true score, meaning what we would expect the actual rating to be, and similarity between coders, and only 20% is due to error variance, meaning the raters themselves are different. And 80% would be very good. We can look at other things in Deduce as well. So the user excerpts, this is saying how much are people coding, very consistent here. Code application talks about how many codes are being used. So this person is using twice the amount of codes as this person. Although they're coding the same amount of excerpts, this person is only using half the codes, this person is using more of the codes. We can look at expert count. So this is by our media, and we can see that there's more coding happening from this person and less codes are happening with these. So this person's voice is overrepresented, and these two people might be underrepresented. Here we have the code presence absent, so we can just see, is this code represented across multiple things, or is it really only seen by a few people? Taking that further, it's not just seen by a few people, it's not coded much by them at all, versus this one is more reliable. It's coded across everybody and coded very heavily across everybody. We can also use descriptors and look at this code split by who is represented. So this code is only talked about by faculty versus this code is a little bit more even, but this code is more heavily represented by students. And we can look at the overall. So overall in the data, it's pretty well represented, and it's a nice split between faculty voice and student voice, although students are represented slightly more.